God of War sells a lot.
And Microsoft's concessions.
Part 2.
Well, hello and welcome back, hopefully, to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. I'm your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, back in his rightful place, is one...
Chris Figs. Mr. Chris Figs.
There you go. Thank you. Today, we'll see us talking The Witcher remake, taking the game open world, being more of a reimagining. Microsoft's concessions to help move the Activision deal along. Excuse me. And God of War Ragnarok's impressive performance being overshadowed by the towering husk of Pokemon. But for now, let's start this show off the only way that I know how, by checking in on what Chris has been doing and what he's been playing. Because as you may remember, Chris was not with us last week.
Yes, so, I was not.
Chris, you have a lot to account for.
Oh, God.
Regale the people with what you've been doing.
Jeez, I've played a lot of games because I'm insane. So this week, I've basically been playing Evil West and Evil Genius 2 World Domination. So that's been my week this week.
Just an evil week, huh?
It's just been an evil-ass week. I didn't even notice that. Funny guy. But last week... This is where I'd have good, if I had any. No, and then last week I played a lot of Oblivion, a lot of 2022's Game of the Year, Vampire Survivor, and I think that was it for last week. I think it was. So
here's the problem, Chris.
Yeah. Hi.
Is that you said last week you've been playing Oblivion.
True.
Not this week. And that's what we call a cardinal sin. Okay.
Fair. That's fair.
So Chris, I would like to explain to everyone that, and this is very important to get out of the way immediately.
It is.
I
switch sides. You're a traitor.
Yes.
This is actually...
Which I guess you are too, because you...
This is actually XY, a Xbox podcast.
No, so I wouldn't say impulse buy, but I think it may be the closest thing to still get the point across.
The story you told
Friday,
me, that's an impulse buy, dog.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Black Friday, of course, came, and I noticed that they said they'd have Xbox Series X's in stock while we were at Walmart. So I walked by, and there goes one sitting on top of a stack behind the cashier. And so I just asked, like, hey, is that actually available, or did somebody already call for dibs with that? And they're like, oh, no, we got multiple. We just have that one up there for people to see. So because Chris has been playing Oblivion,
yes,
and I knew that, and he's been playing it using the enhanced backwards compatibility that has the game run at 4K resolution and 60 frames per second, looking crisp and feeling fluid. Chris, you got me to pull the trigger on the Series X finally, but there's a lot of things into that decision because I have the computer that is pretty capable.
Sure, but
there's a couple of things. My computer's still really not a 4K machine; it's more of a 1440p machine, which is fine because I have a 1440p monitor. But I think the other thing is I've really just landed on the fact that I don't really want to play on PC unless there's no other option. I spend my whole day at work on a PC, and I just can't. It's funny, Chris, you sent me that thing earlier of Lex Friedman and Todd Howard, and I actually did listen to that. It was great for the drive, so thank you.
You're welcome. Always thinking about you.
But one thing that Todd Howard said that I really resonate with, and I was like, I need to stop fighting it, is that idea of he said he plays games and builds games all day long at a computer. So when he gets home and plays games and stuff, he's very much a plop on the couch. So he's like, he really prefers consoles because of his line of work. And I get that. Like when I get home, I don't want to come sit in front of a computer screen yet again with two feet away from a small screen. I want to sit on the couch, leaning back with my feet propped up, controller in hand on a big TV. Yeah. And so to that end, I feel more comfortable playing the upcoming Xbox games that I do want to play on my TV in my game room. So I made the choice, but I would be lying to myself if I didn't admit that a large chunk of me spent $500 just on the ability to play 4K 60 frames per second Oblivion with a controller, because as anybody who may have tried, the PC version of Oblivion came out in that weird spot where the 360 controller was supported by Windows, but basically no games supported it. So like Fable, The Lost Chapters, no controller support. And it was an Xbox game. Like it was made by Xbox. Oblivion was partnered with Xbox and had enjoyed some console exclusivity. No controller support on PC. So I've been having a blast and the game looks fantastic. But Chris, I gotta ask, because at this point, I don't think it is something you could even worry about spoiling. How far are you? Like, what's in terms of what's the last thing you can remember doing?
I just saved Martin. I brought him back to wherever you're supposed to take him. I think I don't remember where.
Waynon Priory.
That's it. Yes, Waynon Priory. Fuck. And then. And then I did the first quest of the Dark Brotherhood, so I killed Rufio. Stabbed the shit out of that boy.
Nice. Dude, the Dark Brotherhood quest line's great.
It is. I knew exactly what I had to do. I was like, when the what is it, Kayat or whatever, Kiat, when that whole thing happens, there was one guard all by himself, and I like looked around, did a nice little quick save. I'm like, all right, no one's here. Killed that guy, and for no reason, and then knew that if I passed out, I would get LeChance standing over my bed. Yeah, and it worked. So now I'm doing the Dark Brotherhood. It's a great game.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but as we've kind of talked about, this is your first true, real foray into Oblivion, right? Like you've maybe played it here and there before.
I have vague memories of closing Oblivion gates, but that's about it.
Okay, it's like so you never beat the game at least prior.
I don't think so.
Okay,
I don't think so.
Did you ever do the arena?
No.
Okay, so I can tell you where I'm at. I've already passed that, and I went and I've gotten to where I can go meet up with Mankar Cameron and the Mythic Dawn. I don't want to say too much more because this is relatively fresh to you, but in the Imperial City is an arena that you can go to, and you can go become a participant in the arena. And it's iconic. It's always been one of my favorite parts of that game. Like when I start that game, I go to as soon as I get the chance. I normally do up to the point where the game tells you to go to the Imperial City because you'll be leveled up enough. But you should absolutely do. It's impossible for me to look at the game without a shitload of nostalgia.
Yeah,
but I would be really curious to see you who you don't think you've ever done it do it. I feel like you would remember it because it's iconic. I mean, it's an iconic part of that game. It's great.
I'm more than happy to give it a try. That's for sure. I do like it. So
you need to go back to it. I know there's a lot going on, but you got to go back. I don't
plan on skipping it. It's Game of the Year time, man. I got to play Evil West. Then I got to play Midnight Suns, and then Callisto Protocol is the same day as Midnight Suns. Whose decision that was is nuts. Thanks, Glenn.
I'm with you, right? It's Game of the Year time, and I'm about to start Signalis because one of the other games I played was Hot Wheels Unleashed, and your boy got the platinum.
Very proud.
That game is incredibly fun. Yeah, thank you. You were a big help in that.
Oh, I do what I can for you, buddy.
Yeah, you do what you can. Chris is tried and true. He was like, I don't care what's going on. You tell me, I'll hop on. We're going to do this thing. To the point last night where I was like, I need to go to bed. And he was like, are you sure? I will stay up.
Not even that. I was playing Apex with my friend and I ended the session to help you.
You did.
We're done. But I logged on to Apex because you didn't respond to my message for I think it was only like 15 minutes. But he had messaged me in between then. So I'm like, sure. And then you hopped on. I'm like, well, Sean, I did tell Brett I was going to help him with this. So I'm going to hop off. But
well, hold on, though.
You have played a third game this week.
I've played plenty of games this week. It's been a very odd week for me. I finally played not one, not two, but 3 games of Apex.
3 games of Apex. So with that, I would like to tell everyone that my wedding was wonderful. Brett was my best man. He got me a second place finish. She is absolutely a lucky lady. I'm going to have to get it annulled now that I've played the games of Apex, but
hey, it's a means to an end.
If you're listening,
I'm sure the judge will understand.
I hope so. Yeah. Listen, we had to not win a single game together.
And then I'll throw out my last couple. So God of War Ragnarok, I got the platinum in. I was not too far off of whenever me and Joe did the episode. And then I'm almost to the first gym in Pokemon Violet, and I've been doing a lot of exploration. And I got to tell you, that game is a prime example of seeing a game rife with potential, but also rife with just problems. And I can understand why people are enjoying it and liking it. But the game's pretty rough. So it's unfortunate, but it's also not too surprising.
With Pokemon, is it so bad that it's impossible to ignore? Because normally it doesn't bother me.
Okay. So far it hasn't been that overwhelmingly, but I have had 2 moments where the game was so bad that I had to do the restart trick where you like close the game because apparently I'd had it on for too long. Because I've sparingly played the game, but it's been in sleep mode, right? So memory leak happens, apparently. But I told you that I went to Docket to try out, and not that we did a great job of it, but try out co-op with my buddy Donovan. And as soon as I docked it, the game went from like 26 to 30 frames per second pretty consistently to like 20 or less than. And I mean, like, it was like watching a stutter. And since the whole game is tied, like the game speed is tied to your frame rate. So if your frame rate's lower, it's not that you're skipping frames. The whole game slows down to match the frame rate, which is incredibly weird. So with that in mind, that was one of 2 examples where it was too bad. And I was like, I have to do something because I can't play this way. And it didn't stop. Like I tried giving it like 30 seconds because I thought I docked it. There's a higher, it's got a higher resolution, but that didn't change much.
That is disappointing to hear. Because I did pre-order it, and I pre-ordered it early. And then it was coming out and I was watching videos of it and I was like, oh, no, this looks bad. And then I started playing it and I was like, oh, no, this looks bad. And I I haven't played it since.
It's crazy to me because I don't know how far you are. Did you at least make it to the lighthouse?
I went in the lighthouse, yeah.
Okay, so if you climb to the top of the lighthouse and you're sitting there with Nimona or whatever her name is, and you see it kind of sweep across the landscape, and I'm like, damn, it's got like a cool painterly art style, but then it's got absolutely zero shadows in the distance. So there's like no depth to it at all. Mm-hmm. And so it was like I was looking at a work in progress that's about to be really cool once the person paints all the shadows in. And I was like, I know that they don't want to render real shadows, but most games render approximation shadows to like give you the sense of shadows so that you keep the depth of the image. Because without much shadow, an image looks flat. So it looks like I'm looking at a very flattened image of like a huge building, but then a plane in front of it, but it looks just like 2 feet because of it's very hard to describe. But the game is fun. It's got a lot of good aspects about it. I just think that this is the worst it's been from a performance standpoint. Sword and Shield had a couple of weird little moments, specifically in the wild area or whatever it was called. But none of it was like this. And Arceus wasn't like this. I told you, Arceus ran great for me.
Yeah.
and looked better and had better draw distance. I'll tell you one thing to be careful of. I don't know why, but whenever you walk far enough away for you to stop seeing a Pokemon, mm-hmm. if you take one or 2 more steps and then you turn around and move back into render distance, it's gone. So they refresh every time that you're close enough, and that's only like 8 foot in front of your character.
That's crazy. That's really
pretty
bad.
Rough. So if you see a shiny and then you happen to accidentally you notice it as you're walking away and you're like, then you turn around, it could be gone.
That's awful. Okay. I hope they patch it.
But I am enjoying it. But the other one was, if I didn't say it, was Metal Hellsinger. I bought it and just wanted to try it out. And it has the problem that Guitar Hero faced when it was moving to the HD era, where I cannot land on a comfortable feeling of the game being calibrated. Like no matter what I do, I feel like I'm on beat to what I'm hearing. Mm-hmm. But it's not, the game says I'm not on beat. And that's like, that game is a rhythm game tied to a shooter. So you get more damage if you're shooting on the rhythm. And it's pretty cool because you have to build. So as you build the multiplier, more instruments come in. And like once you get to a 16 times multiplier, vocals come into the songs. So like you can technically bullshit and beat the level without staying on beat and getting a multiplier, but you're going to like not hear the majority of the song. So I don't know. I was having a rough time. I died a few times because I was like, maybe I'm just doing something wrong. But every time that I was doing it on beat, it fell off beat to me. So I was like, something's going on. I got to turn my TV in low latency mode when I'm playing that game. Maybe wire my controller, something I got to do. But it's cool.
Yeah. It does seem cool. I'm going to give it more of a shot, but yeah.
Got to get that Hot Wheels Unleashed plat first, you know?
No. I am more likely to get the 1000 in Vampire Survivors. I'll tell you that much.
Nice.
Vampire Survivors.
I'm glad you're still liking that game.
Excellent game. Oh God, yeah. I don't want to be talking to you. I want to play Vampire Survivors.
Oh, go, Chris. I mean,
community's sake. Hurry up.
Do what you gotta do. Oh boy. Yeah, Chris. I hope that you can get Oblivion under your belt so we can find out what your definitive favorite Bethesda game is.
Fallout 3.
I'm sure, but I'm also just curious.
Yeah, Fallout 3.
All right. So the community's take this week was a very simple one, of course, and it was with the idea of Thanksgiving being in last week. So with Thanksgiving in mind, having just passed, at least in the United States, what are 5 games you are thankful for this year? So it doesn't matter if they released this year, if you think they deserve awards or anything more simple than they exist and you're thankful for it. I did intend to make this be games you played this year, but a lot of people ended up including a few games that they didn't play this year they're just thankful for, which I don't mind. A lot of great answers, but we did skin this down to just one from each area. So if you want to be part of the community's take in the future, you can head over to our social media and find us on Twitter at Triangle SQRD. You can find us in Facebook at a group like one new listener did, Justin Goodrum, or at least a new member, and ask to be entered into there. We'll gladly let you in. Then lastly, we always have our Discord, which is where you can most easily find us, linked in the description below, whether you're watching on video, or listening on podcast services. For those of you who are watching on video, I hope that you noticed and appreciated the visual sprucing up that I chose to do last minute last week. I think it looks significantly better, and I hope that it makes a better viewing experience for you guys. So lastly, one thing that our patrons who went over to patreon.com/Nartech and gave as little as $1 per month enjoy is typically preferred reading. So if we get an answer from them we like, we'll go ahead and push them in front as a thank you for supporting the show. And one of the people who did do that, Mr. Jehudi MD, longtime listener, longtime patron, he says, for Hades and Returnal, for showing how a roguelike game should be made, for Control, for showing me that games can be grand and fun without having a sensible story, for God of War Ragnarok, for reminding me how PS first-party studios are among the best in the industry, and non-game related, Halo lore, for showing how games can get their lore expanded in such ways that are interconnected, expansive, and rich through physical media. And I think he's meaning like all the extended stuff, books, shows. I actually haven't watched the show, but there's a lot of books and stuff for that. So I like that answer, and I like your reasoning for each one, but I want to take a couple of these things to task for our own preferences. So as longtime listeners probably know, I adored Hades. And Chris, I think you loved Hades as well, right?
Mm-hmm. I did.
Okay.
Almost have the platinum.
But a game that Chris and I both just did not click with, me to a larger extent, and or at least my enjoyment of it was bigger than Chris's, I feel like. Returnal is an interesting show here because I feel like as much as I think Returnal is a cool game, I think it's a prime example of bad roguelike design because I don't think it's quick enough for your iteration to be enjoyable for that. I mentioned that a few times. So, Chris, what is it that you specifically love about roguelikes, and how would you say a roguelike game should be made while we're kind of looking at the spirit of this answer?
I think with Returnal, it was too hard and too long. Because I think if you're doing a roguelike,
That's what she said.
Not to you. Woo! Turned it around. No, I think if you're looking at Returnal, I think what Returnal does is show you the upper limits of how difficult a game can be and a roguelite. Because I think if a game is easy, like if you had an easy roguelite and you were like, okay, this game takes 20 hours, and if you die, you have to start over, but the game is super easy. Fine. You can't do that if the game is hard. And I think Returnal is hard and too long, which is the problem.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with. I think the issue is just the iterative process of roguelikes is that you learn with each run, but each run is quick succession. So like if you fuck up 20 minutes into a run of Hades, you kind of learn what they like, oh, I went too aggressive or I wasn't defensive enough or whatever it be. You learn how to work around that for your next run, but you're into your next run basically immediately. And you're also, excuse me, the run itself, even a perfect run for Hades is like an hour. And I think we talked about this a little bit last week, so I don't want to overly tread, but I think Returnal is such an interesting and potentially divisive game for roguelikes. But it clearly got a lot of love, and I'm glad it did. I think it's a well-made game in terms of it feels great to control. The challenge is fun and welcoming. But for me personally, playing 2 hours of a run and then dying and then be like, if I want to play any more today, I have to keep playing. Like I can't stop and play another game if I'm in the middle of a good run. My favorite thing about roguelikes is that they mess up your sense of time, and suddenly what you thought was like 45 minutes of a roguelike, you look and you're like, oh, I've been playing for like 4 hours. And I think Returnal is the exact opposite of that for me, where it's like, oh, God, I've been playing for 2.5 hours on a single run. And I don't know. It's such an odd game, but it got a lot of love for Housemarque. And I'm curious to see if their next game will also be a roguelite or what, Because like Chris, a good example, I bought Ship of Fools. We haven't played it yet, and that's a crime. We need to. I think you're muted, but
we do need to. Sorry, I'm sick, I'm trying not to cough into the mic, etc.
I understand, Chris. It's okay.
It's more for the audience to understand that.
We're here for you.
That's so nice. That's so nice.
Yeah.
Can you send me Gatorade, please?
You know what? I can send you that. I saw them this morning. I was like, I need to send those, but I was driving a bunch today, so I
Gatorade,
pretzels.
Oh, pretzels.
They've just been sitting there for you. I've not dug into them. I've wanted to. But I've shown restraint. Okay,
that's really good,
Chris. This is going to be the hardest thing I ever have to do.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's a big confession out of you, man.
I know. I tell you. A secondary question that's kind of within this that I don't think you've talked about much on the show, but I know that you've definitely made a few remarks a little bit. All year, you have been all about Sony's first-party games before they come out. Yeah. Then they come out and you either barely play them and then fall off, or you never start playing them to begin with.
Okay.
So the most recent example of that being God of War Ragnarok.
Oh, God. Yeah. That's true.
So my question to you is, what do you think's going on here? Do you think it's you falling out of love with the Sony style of game? Do you think it's burnout from other games being similar? Or do you just think that there's other games that are pulling and holding your interest enough, or just some other completely different reason? Like, what's going on here? Because it's been weird seeing you be like, you have to buy The Last of Us Part 1, and then you don't play it at all. And then you be like, yo, you are you getting this? And then I get it, and you're like, yeah, well, never mind. I'm just not going to play it.
Yeah, sorry. No,
it's fine. I'm going to play them anyway, so I'm no skin off my back.
To be fair, if you'd said no to The Last of Us in that moment, I would have bought it, which is what makes it funnier, is that I would have bought it and never played it.
Like about, what do you think, 70% of your library? Or do you think
90.
It's higher?
Solid 90. Because you're forgetting about the 400 PS2 and PS3 games I have.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think this is going to be a controversial take and people are going to be mad at me, but Sony games have maxed out at like an 8. and they get 10s across the board almost every time, and I never understand. Like, if Horizon had gotten a 7, I probably would like that game. But I went into it expecting a 10, and I got a 4, and I was like, this sucks. Like, this is just not fun. And that was what it was.
Now, to be fair with that, like, you also weren't a fan of Horizon to begin with, so I don't really think there was much of a reason for you to be that excited.
I beat the first one. I beat it,
and you couldn't even bring yourself to do that here. That's important. Yeah, it's an important distinction.
But that's the same with God of War. I also think it's
important to give you credit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even give myself credit, because I think God of War Ragnarok is a great game, but people have been acting as if you can't. Apparently, you're being negative if you have any critique of the game, and I don't really think that's a fair standpoint. I think you should be able to say how you feel about a game, and it doesn't have to be everything. The good with the bad. God of War Ragnarok is a fantastic game, and I'm glad I've played it. Doesn't mean that there's not things I would have changed or things I wish were different. And the same is true of Horizon Forbidden West, to be fair. Ironically, I think the only game I didn't have issue with, because it was a known quantity outside of the price. And
Ratchet.
Even then, I mean, oh no, but for this year was specifically The Last of Us. Ironically. It's the game where I knew what I was getting into, so I don't have any new qualms with it other than that it was $70, when I don't think it really needed to be, but we've treaded that argument as much as we can. So I support your ability to say these things, but at the same time, we both know that in saying these things, you welcome some sense of fury.
That's the thing. If people want to be mad at me and say like, "Oh, you're a bad PlayStation gamer for not liking these games," that's fine. That's cool. I got more platinums than you. Like, suck my dick. Like, like, because the reality is, like, I'm sure all of these games are good. Like, there's no part of me that's sitting here like, "Oh, these games are bad for everyone." But like, I played Horizon and didn't want to play it anymore immediately.
That is true.
And like with God of War, I want to play God of War, and we've had this conversation. I hate. Oh, I probably shouldn't have even said that.
Yep. Nope. 26 or 27. I got to cut that for sure. Continue.
Well, how am I supposed to continue? That's my whole critique of the game.
Just be more vague about it.
I hate. I don't know what. I don't know. I hate that the game is called. I'm trying to figure it out. Let me see. Sony Santa Monica have decided to make certain gameplay changes that affect the flow of the narrative and the story, which really piss me off and have continued to make me not want to turn the game on again and experience the change in flow and narrative of the story. It makes me not want to play the game that I bought, because the game that I bought is not what I'm playing, and it pisses me off, and I don't want to do it. Was that vague enough?
That is vague enough, but I also think it's very important for you to be honest with yourself and with the audience that a secondary element is that you're spending far longer on every aspect of the game because you're playing on Give Me God of War.
Oh, I should.
And the game is already difficult. But I played on Give Me No Mercy up until the final fight that I needed for the trophy, because I was just kind of like, I don't care anymore. I'm ready to be done with the game and have the platinum, and it was hard. So I dropped it down to Give Me Balance and beat the final person that I needed for the trophy.
I could turn it down, and I've had that thought, but again, it's not.
All I'm saying is that's exacerbating issues you already have with the game. But because not only you can't even move through them quickly, some of the issues you're having with the game, you're lingering on them for longer, and that's making your hate for them, I think, grow larger as well.
Maybe, but the second that Sony Santa Monica decided to change the narrative and dynamic of the game from what I bought to what I have to do now, I do not want to continue. Even
more ironic that you didn't anticipate that.
I did, and I didn't want it to happen. That was my thing. Like, people were like, "Oh, this is going to happen in the end. This is going to happen in the end." And I'm like, if that happens, I'm not playing these games anymore. I didn't.
There's a very large question to have around God of War, with God of War being a catalyst for conversation. around what aspects of an IP are most important to people, and how hard of a tightrope is it to balance that expectation, you know what I mean, between disparate groups of fans. Because I'm sure there's people that probably loved the change. There's people who are probably like, I expected it, and it's not taking up a significant enough portion of the game that it's okay. And then there's probably people like you that are just like, this is holy, I don't like this.
It's
but they
unbearable. It is genuinely unbearable.
Yeah, and I mean, and just to throw it out there for anybody who probably can guess what it is if you've played the game, I don't agree. I don't think it's like the best thing, but I think it's fine. And I came into the game anticipating it, so it really wasn't a surprise at all.
I anticipated the last hour of the game being that. If you can pick up all the pieces I'm putting down saying that, that's what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah,
and
but to not run the risk of spoiling the game anymore, I think we should probably move off of that particular example. But it still goes to the fact that this year has been a very odd one for you in terms of PlayStation exclusives and your enjoyment of them.
Yeah, I mean, I want to like these games. It's just at a certain point, other games pick up my interest, and that's what I'd rather play. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I think Evil West is 10 times more fun than God of War. In the situation I'm in.
And then there's a conversation about like Evil West is not worried about narrative to the same degree as God of War, and what value is there when a game is just purely more fun versus better storytelling or better presentation, or all these different facets that people find. And like I mentioned, I think Sonic Frontiers put me in a really weird mental state for what I was wanting from games at that time, not specifically God of War or any other game, but two games that I played right before God of War was Hot Wheels Unleashed, pure gameplay. That is a game that has no story. I mean, it technically does, but it's literally just an excuse to put levels together on a map. And then you have Sonic Frontiers, which has a story, but the story is the story is just to support and facilitate cool gameplay moments. Whereas I feel like God of War is the other side of that. And so living in that, I think I came into God of War being like, this isn't as gameplay fun as often as those two games were, and this is messing with me, and I had to kind of overcome that. And once I did, it was fine.
Let me just put it this way to you, right? If one day you've been driving all day, you're like, oh man, I really, really want a fat, juicy steak. This is what I want. I'm craving it. You've been looking forward to this steak for 3 years, 4 years, right? You bought your plate specifically to put this steak on it when the steak is done, right?
That's a great analogy.
And then the steak finishes cooking, right? And you're about a third of the way through the steak, and it's fucking tofu in the middle. That's how I feel about God of War. Okay. That is the biggest problem with God of War, because it's like, and it's weird because I know that after I get through this vile tofu, I'm going to end up with that thick, juicy steak again. But I also know that there's not going to be enough steak before I have to suffer through the tofu. And that's what's been having me put it down. Even if I put it on the lowest difficulty and just shot my way through that section of the story, I don't know, man. I'm still eating goddamn tofu.
You know, there's something that's really interesting in talking about Sony first-party games like this that has been weird. Like, so Uncharted popularized the handhold climbing, right? Where you have handholds that are painted some way or visually indicated that they can be climbed on, and you spend large chunks of several minute chunks climbing sometimes, if not at least long enough chunks to be noticeable. And I feel like they pretty much graduated past that on the same console generation that they started that, because by the time they got to The Last of Us didn't really do that. Now, of course, they revisited it with Uncharted because it's a little bit more of Uncharted's DNA, but ironically, The Last of Us Part 2 comes along, and The Last of Us Part 2 finds how to be vertical completely separate from handholds, which is how Uncharted found out how to be vertical, you know? And what I think is really interesting about that is all these other Sony games have been playing catch up to that, right? Like Horizon was like, well, now we're going to have symbols on this thing and we're going to have you climb and do all this stuff. And then God of War is like, we're going to do the same. And I think it's interesting because there's times in God of War where I'm like, you already had your series in the past has already had ways to make climbing more interesting and fun. And I think honestly, they're more interesting and fun than what they put into this game. Used to, of course, it didn't look as good, but used to, I love that Kratos would like stab the blades into the wall and then like climb on the blades, and then he would pull them out, and then they would, to not make the climb boring, to give you verticality, they would put puzzles around that sometimes, do Prince of Persia style stuff with it, but then they would also do this thing where it's like, oh, we're going to put enemies, we're going to put challenge into the climbing. Whereas now they're like, well, we're going to put story into the climbing, or we're going to try and at least get you to a more vertical place to tell you a certain aspect of the story with climbing. And the entire game, I kept being like, come on, throw enemies at me while I'm climbing. Cause that's what God of War used to do. But instead, Uncharted pioneered, made the way, graduated from it for the most part, barely dipped its toe back into it on PS4, and here we are in the PS5, and games are still playing like, oh yeah, Uncharted really revolutionized this 16 years ago. You know what I mean? And I find that so crazy that we're living in that world. And I also hate the way it looks. Why in the hell would in any game, like, okay, Horizon did a great job because it's all based on the focus. The focus is telling you like this is an optimal path to climb. So in the world that makes sense. I hate that in God of War there's just like little painted symbols of what you can and can't climb on. And I try to like write my own reason, like, oh, Faye knew you were going to be doing this because of prophecy, so she went and painted every handhold you would ever come near to tell you the exact way to go. But that's me having to find some bullshit way to justify something that is just game studios refusing to let aspects that were popularized 16 years ago go, when most games have moved away from it. Like Assassin's Creed doesn't have that problem because it doesn't use handholds. It uses free flow parkour. And that works a lot better because it feels like, okay, it's fun. Like Infamous doesn't use handholds. It uses like, you're going to climb on shit and you're just going to you're going to jump. And it's funny to me that climbing is so boring in modern games when by the end of the PS3 era, I feel like most things figured out how to make climbing fun. Like it was like, well, just because we're going to have you climb doesn't mean we're going to break gameplay. We're going to either find fun and interesting ways for you to climb. And like, dude, Second Son having it to where with your fire powers, you could like go in at the bottom of the building and then shoot up through a smoke pipe at the top. That was cool. Fucking awesome. How do you not take that lesson and then use those lessons elsewhere? Because
I think, let me see if this resonates with
people are going to hate that. People are going to, it's like, y'all are ripping on Sony. I'm really not. But I'm ripping on the game industry's inability to let things go.
What I'm about to say is very much an Xbox fanboy talking point, right? But I don't think Sony makes games anymore. I think they make movies with gameplay. And that's fine because the gameplay is most of the time very good. But if you look at games I love, right? And let's use a Sony exclusive, right? I think Days Gone is one of the best games to come out of Sony in the last 10 years.
Sure.
That is a game. God of War is a story interrupted by gameplay. That's what it is. The gameplay is immaculate, but it's a story that is interrupted by gameplay.
Well, you know, it's funny how much more on like games. Yeah, of course, but it's funny how much more like God of War. One of the things I noted is that doing side content that didn't have like all the interruptions from a normal story where they're trying to control pacing in certain aspects of the main storyline. The side content, even that had story, felt more like a game. Like it was interesting and kind of more fun. Like it made me like the game more to continue playing it and get the platinum because it felt like I was playing a game more so than the main thing did. And I'm not saying that has to be bad, but I think it spoke to what I went into God of War looking for, which was more gameplay focused. And I feel like God of War used to be that. And I don't begrudge them for doing Ragnarok this way because it's what they set the tone with in 2018. It's just, I don't know. This game does, And I mean, yeah, you're right across all of them, but looking at God of War, it specifically does a lot of things to reference its history and its past. And I feel like they did a lot of things to get closer to like, here's some elements that you kind of expect that are familiar but different for this world. And I felt like that's why I was like, why am I climbing then without something to attack? Like you've solved this problem and then you took a step back to try and be more like another game.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
whether
Sony
that was
has
intentional or not
kind of just started to homogenize their games. I just feel like they all play the same, and this is not like a super hot take. Like people know that they're the home of the over-the-shoulder third-person camera dad and son simulator game. That's fine.
You know what's more funny, Chris? That was completely accidental. I just hit the one on my mouse. I gotta pull the audio track in now because people have got to be able to hear that. Go ahead.
100%. No, I just think that the games are kind of all blending in. All the mechanics are the same. You know, every woman married to a Sony protagonist loves them because they have the strongest fingers in the world. Like it all feels the same, you know? All of them can hold the edges of rocks for hours on end with just their fingertips. And it's like, yeah, all right. I understand what's going on here, but there's nothing different. You know, even Returnal, which is something different, that's just a whole other bag of worms.
I don't want to say all Sony games. I think that's clearly getting to a weird thing because, I mean, I think Spider-Man mostly avoids that problem. Definitely, I thought Miles Morales mostly avoided that problem.
Spider-Man,
and I think that was very evident by the fact that like when you could skip cutscenes in Miles Morales when you were doing New Game Plus, like me and you did for the Platinum,
4 hours. Or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean you could say what you want to, but I'd rather have 4 hours of really fun gameplay and cool story moments that are better paced than have a 30-hour game with a whole lot of odd pacing choices.
Right.
So in that sense, I mean, I thought Ratchet and Clank was a really tight, 12, 15-hour experience as well. It used its time well. You should play Rift Apart.
Ratchet's one I do genuinely want to play. I don't know. I just think that there's something to be said that the Sony games that I've played and enjoyed were at their best when you could skip all the cutscenes and get through just the gameplay.
Well, Chris, can I say something?
Yeah, you can. You definitely can say something.
I wish that we wouldn't have had this conversation here because I feel like it's going so against the spirit of the community's take question, which is to be thankful for games.
I'm really thankful for Fallout 3 and Persona 5.
I'm glad. I was going to ask you what your 5 thankful games were for this year. But you know what? We'll come back around to that conversation, hopefully. But I do want to get through the rest of the community's take so that we're not taking it up with that large conversation. Because I do think that there's a conversation to be had there. And I think there's going to be some people that are upset that we're criticizing. But I think it's important to know that you can love something and criticize it because you want it to be that much better. And that's all it is. So with that in mind, though, we got one from the Skinny Rage over on Twitter. He says, I'm thankful for Ace Combat coming back in a big way, too. Also for Mud Runner and Snow Runner, which are two, essentially, I struggle. They're simulation games in many ways where you're going through and pulling freight and stuff through snow and mud. They're very interesting games. He says, games I don't think would exist without PS4 going to x86 architecture. In fact, there's a few games ported that probably wouldn't have been. Heavenly Bodies, Hellaborn, Car X, or some. And I think that's pretty cool because he's specifically kind of looking at the fact that some people talk about how bespoke architecture led to really interesting games like PS3 Day. But looking at the benefits of going to x86 and being able to easily port games from PC and whatnot over is there's a lot of benefits to it. And I think he's right. Some of these games would have never made it to the console market if it was as difficult to port them as it once was. So it's kind of like, Chris, you're playing Vampire Survivor, a game that I am curious if it would have actually hit consoles had it not been for how easy it is to port, as well as Microsoft's initiative for having games release on both.
Yeah. So, I don't know, but I certainly hope it comes to PlayStation so everyone listening can play it.
Yeah, there you go. And the last one comes from, like I mentioned, a new member in our Facebook, Justin Goodrum. He says, I can feel all 5 with one answer: the Uncharted series. They're my comfort games. Whenever there's a dead period in games or just down on life, I marathon them all as a pick-me-up, usually once a year, but twice this year. And, for all the stuff we just said, I think I was talking about how every game tried copying that handholds thing. Uncharted is the one that did it best. Because I feel like Uncharted's pacing between action moments and climbing moments helped. One thing I thought was really interesting is that Ragnarok completely ditches the element of surprise that the Uncharted games have, where as you're climbing, you're on the edge of your seat, like, is this handhold going to stay or is it going to fall? And I'm going to have to quickly grab something else. God of War is like, Kratos is a god. He's got perfect hands. Nothing will ever break under him. So it's like you're just climbing and there's never that sense of danger on the edge of like, oh, this handhold might fall. But to my joke, Kratos is a god. So what would really be like, is there that much of a risk in him falling to begin with?
True. It's more Atreus on his back.
Fair enough.
Okay, can I ask one question about God of War?
Sure.
Does Kratos fart?
I wonder.
Right?
Can I ask a question about God of War?
Yeah.
Does Kratos smell like ass?
Yeah.
This man has never bathed, as far as I'm concerned, at least not since the original 3 games. He used to bathe with hot women and
he bathes in the blood of his enemies.
That's true, but blood stinks.
I play that game sometimes.
Maybe God blood smells better,
and I fear for Mimir. I'm like, dog, you are getting crop dusted for hours on end. Kratos might be conscious of it, like when they're walking
protein
around.
Heavy diet.
Oh, 1,000%. That dude is eating nothing but red meat. Are you kidding me? Mimir must not be able to smell.
Yeah, you'd hope.
You gotta hope. Because you gotta think, like, even if Kratos, which I don't even know if he seems like a nice enough guy to be conscious of it, right? When he's fighting, that dude is just letting it out. Because he can't... He can't be thinking about it all the time, right? If a Draugr's coming and he's got to choose between swinging the Leviathan axe and farting and holding in a fart, he's probably going to swing the Leviathan axe. So Mimir catches some of that.
You've been there in life, right? You've been in a situation where a fart was coming at an inopportune time and like, I guess the fart's coming because I got to do something else.
Yeah, 100%.
Unfortunate, but that's life. Sometimes you just got to fart. Wicked font.
Wow. Either way, I love Uncharted. Really impressed that series. You can play those games twice a year.
Oh, dude, twice a year is pretty crazy, but I do like playing those games. Once a year is probably, I don't know, all of them once a year. I could probably do like a few of them. But here's the other side of the Uncharted thing is Uncharted knows just to be like a 12 to 15 hour game. I think that some of these issues are compounded on not Sony's insistence, but developers' insistence that games have to be 30 plus hours now. And it's like every issue that is like either not noticeable or even not an issue at 12 to 15 hours can quickly become one at double that time. It's a real tightrope to walk as a development standpoint. But that also goes back to what I was talking about with iteration, right? These games aren't iterating quick enough. So I feel like we're seeing vestigial aspects of some mechanics because they always wanted to try out those mechanics and use them, but now it's taking 6 years to make a game. So it's like instead of what you would used to see of like, oh, well, Uncharted had these handholds for climbing, and that was pretty cool. And a lot of games are doing it now, so we're going to do it. But that should have been all out of your system by like 2016 to 2018 at most. You know what I mean? Like, let's move on. Let's do something else. Like I don't begrudge elevators because I understand that an elevator in real life is limited to the time it takes for the elevator to raise and lower.
Uh-huh.
So I don't mind standing on an elevator and just sitting there waiting for something to happen because it fits. But being like, well, you got to climb this wall. And there's one wall in particular that I was like, God. It at least ends in a cool moment. But yeah, let's see. Moving on into the news, because I think we wrapped that one up. Justin, well, Brett, thanks for reaching out, man. I appreciate you.
Did you give your 5?
Oh, I didn't. So what are your 5? Finish your 5.
Fallout 3 for being a transformative game in my life, turned me into a man. Persona 5 for being a transformative game in my life, turned me into a weeb.
So you're just going across the board, right? I'm going to stick it to games I played this year. I don't know if you may have played both these this year. I'm not saying you haven't.
I have played both these this year, but all right. If I'm doing games I'm thankful for this year, Vampire Survivor, thanks for being better than God of War and winning Game of the Year 2022.
Bold.
It's a fact. Modern Warfare 2 for being fun again, making COD fun again. Let's see. I need one more. Pokemon Violet. Because that game's embarrassing. And thanks for embarrassing yourself in front of everyone, Nintendo. It's nice to see you can do some wrong.
So you're thankful for Nintendo failing?
Yeah, that's hopefully this will make them... No.
They failed upwards. No. Hold up. They failed upwards.
I'm hopeful that...
As the news will reveal.
I'm hopeful that the performance of that game will make them realize that they should probably invest in a console that runs them.
Spoiler alert.
It will not.
They won't.
I love the picture I sent you guys with Samuel Jackson and Filthy Frank.
It's true, though. It's so ridiculous that game failed forwards.
100%. Nintendo can do no wrong, but at
it's
the same time,
it's the power of IP.
100%. It's just because it's Pokemon. So that's why I bought it.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, so my 5 for this year are Conan Exiles for showing me that The Forest was not a one-off example of me being really into survival games, and that I probably need to stick my toe into more survival games. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. I'm thankful for Oblivion because playing it again, it just makes me realize how on the ball Bethesda once were in terms of speed and quality, while also being quirky and not necessarily player friendly. And there's a real weird conversation to have around that because, like Todd Howard mentioned, something that makes a lot of sense about the way they look at making it to where they have a classless system with Skyrim is that he wanted to stop people from recreating characters just to have, because they choose a class, realize they don't like that gameplay, and then they have to restart, make a new character in a different class. And he wanted to stop that and instead have it where you can change those things. We can use two-handed swords and be like, I don't really like this, so instead I'm just going to pick up learning archery tomorrow. And I liked his example of that's how, like, I'll start tomorrow. He's like, that's how life is. Like, you know, you can, if you just don't like something, you can put it down and you can be like, I want to start archery tomorrow and see if I can get better. So I like that. But at the same time, in most ways of real life, you're not going to be able, like he's saying, like you can put one down and pick another up. Mm-hmm. But the problem I have with Skyrim is that you don't have to put any of them down. You can just be excellent at all of them, which is a little weird. But Oblivion is so obtuse and weird, and having to sleep to level up and having to choose a class and having to select only a few things to level up per level is amazing. Honestly, for as much as I gave guff to the Breath of the Wild for breaking weapons, I don't mind breaking weapons at all in Oblivion. I think that it's a pretty interesting mechanic that forces you to be on your toes, which I know is exactly what people say about this Breath of the Wild.
Look at this guy just making that up. That's insane, dude. That's insane. That's the same thing that happens in Breath of the Wild.
That's what I just said.
I know that. It's just mind-boggling. They're like, oh, it's great here. It's great.
So anyway, Oblivion, Conan, Infamous 2 for reminding me that Sucker Punch have been at the top of their craft for a long time. Just because they slightly missed with Second Son doesn't mean they still don't kill it. They're
Second
so
Son
good.
Still plays like great.
Oh, Second Son plays better than any of the Infamous games.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the story and everything.
Nothing else is better than the other.
Not as good. Yeah, the morality system is the worst. And it's got the worst moral choices. But Killzone Mercenary for reminding me that the Vita was such a great console with great games and that Killzone was a great series. And then last, Sonic Frontiers for reminding me that I can love Sonic truly and not feel like a phony. Because there's times where I'd be like, I like Sonic. I'm a Sonic fan. People are like, well, okay, did you like Sonic Forces? I didn't think it looked interesting enough to play. Well, did you like Sonic Unleashed? It's okay, kind of stupid, but it's got a banger soundtrack. What did you like Sonic Generations? Yeah, that's the one I did. That's the one I did like. It's one of those things where, have you ever had a series be so consistently out of your preference of liking that even though you're a fan, you're like, I think I may dislike more games than I like in that series?
Yes.
That's how I felt about Sonic. So Frontiers coming and being great and me falling in love with it was like, hell yeah, I am a Sonic fan. It just turns out that Sonic fans tend to not like Sonic games.
I'm glad you were guided by the light.
I was, Chris. But you know what? It's time to move into the news now.
The news.
So first thing up on the list, it appears that December's PS Plus games have leaked. As usual, the leak comes from D Labs and lists Mass Effect Legendary Edition, Biomutant, and Divine Knockout. They will be available from December 6th, 2022 to January 3rd, 2023. And if you didn't pick that up, this is PS Plus Essential games. So all tiers get these. These are the normal monthly games. We have yet to learn what the PS Plus extra games that will be added to the game library service will end up being. But we'll see. Chris, Mass Effect Legendary Edition, clearly a game that you would recommend?
100%. I got the platinum in all 3 Mass Effect games.
Biomutant, a game I would clearly recommend. I got the platinum in that. Very odd and quirky, but super fun in just a very odd way. I haven't heard of Divine Knockout.
Neither have I. I've never seen it.
So
look it up.
The jury's out on that for now. Next thing up, though, because I know Chris doesn't have anything much to say about that. Somebody, please kill me. It appears that Microsoft is likely to offer concessions soon to help push the Activision deal through the EU. It's unknown what the Windows maker plans to offer, but it seems from some of the things they've mentioned that a 10-year licensing deal with Sony is the main course of action to help push this through. Though, if that is what's going on, they've also voiced that Sony is apparently not interested in the 10-year deal. But I think what's interesting is, does Sony have to agree? Or does the CMA have to agree that it's a big enough concession
CMA,
to let it go through? Yeah, that's what I would imagine. So with that in mind, a lot of very interesting things came out of this. Some of it was Microsoft reiterating what we've heard them say before, but just to to new prying eyes, of saying that their games are not as good as PlayStation's. Which, it's a loaded question, because why a game is good or not is a very personal thing. Like, it's hard to look and say that Halo Infinite is objectively worse in every conceivable way than God of War Ragnarok. I don't know that I can say that. I can say that I thought God of War Ragnarok was better than Halo Infinite. But yeah, I think it's interesting either way to hear Microsoft once again. I don't know if you guys remember that there was a point in time where they had an internal document talking about The Last of Us 2 and reviewing it to say, to try and learn how to help them make games to that degree. Things that they thought it did very well that they don't necessarily do well. Another thing that came out of that was Microsoft saying that Game Pass did not have market appeal. Hold on, what was the exact wording? It was very weird. Microsoft say Game Pass. I have to find. Yeah, Game Pass does not have any market power. I don't even know if I know what that means. So they're saying it doesn't have market power today. So adding to it would not be an issue, because it's not like you're taking something that already has market power and then adding to it. You're taking something and adding to it to give it market power. Is that what's going on? It's an odd argument. And I feel like this is just a back and forth of Sony and Microsoft saying things that are foolish out of just an attempt to get both of these things to happen the way they want it to happen. So like Sony is willing to basically clown themselves and say like Microsoft's just trying to make us Nintendo, and because they just don't want to go through. And then Microsoft can be like, our games suck. I know that's not really what's happening, but I think it's really an interesting choice to
Not
be
far
like,
off.
It's like self-degradation.
Yeah, they've got
CMA.
They've got that kink. No, I think it's interesting because if you were to, I know you're not a sports person, but if you were to do this with baseball, right, it would be like one of the teams trying to go after a free agent and being like, yo, our guy sucks. Our guy is awful. And then them signing that free agent and then going to the other guy and being like, hey, we want to give you an extension. He's like, well, you said I suck. Like, why would I want to play for you? Like, that's how this feels. It feels like you mentioned it before the show, but Sony's putting themselves in a position where I wouldn't be surprised, and it would be the funniest outcome of this whole thing if Activision and Bobby Kotick were like, fuck you, and just made Call of Duty exclusive on their own. That would be hilarious.
Yeah, I don't think they'd ever do that, but I do think that Sony, one thing I think is true is that, or that they could probably work out, is that Sony has really soiled a lot of goodwill with Activision, because Activision and Bobby Kotick are clearly in a position where they want to get bought. They want to let this pass through. But at the same time, if it doesn't pass through, then Sony has kind of lost in their own right because they've hurt that thing. So they'd still get Call of Duty on their system, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were like, we're going to take, once your deal's up, your marketing deal, we're going to go to Xbox and just have them pay us maybe even a little bit less, but just out of spite for the hurt that you did to us. I don't know that would happen, but I just have a feeling that one of the things that Sony's been able to leverage for a long time is that they have good, long relationships with a lot of publishers. And I think they're kind of hurting their one with Activision right now. And if I was any other publisher looking, I'd be like, well, if Microsoft comes to us, are they just going to start shitting all over our relationship too? Like, if Microsoft goes to Square Enix, is Sony just going to start being like, hey, fuck you, Square, you're not going to get any of that money, big buddy?
Yeah.
It's a weird standing point because I don't know. There's a couple of things. One thing that is a slight tangent, but I think it's an interesting thing to talk about too, is did you see where Activision claimed that, and it's true, that they have never had any of their games be on a game subscription service in any sizable way, and that short of Xbox buying them out, they had no intentions of going toward that because it cannibalized sales of actual games. So they weren't going to do it. And so they're saying like the only way you're going to see Activision games on a game subscription service is if Microsoft buys us. And their argument there was that they wouldn't be taking anything away from PlayStation because they're already not on PlayStation as a streaming thing. You know what I'm saying?
No.
Like, so Sony's not losing potential. Like, it's not like Call of Duty is going to suddenly hit, like, Modern Warfare 2, a day-and-day release on PS Plus. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. I think that with that, it's like if it was never... The thing is, Microsoft likes to sit here and say, we're not taking things away. And it's like, but you are. I know that they can't say it, but just say that. You know what I mean? Like, just be like, yes, we're buying this to put it on our service. Because Sony's yelling at them because they're trying to take something away. But the whole thing... you're
saying in this particular situation,
in this situation, it would, sure, yeah.
The CMA would be like, you admit it.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
But I think the thing is, it's just like, if you look back at Microsoft's past, like, they're clearly full of shit. Like, even the legacy comment Phil made about, Bethesda. He's like, anything with legacy. All those games have legacy on PlayStation. Every single one. Yeah. Just because the legacy was stronger on Xbox, because I know I didn't listen to the Lex Friedman thing yet, but I saw a clip of Todd Howard being like, well, we were kind of always an Xbox developer. It was always an Xbox developer. And I'm like, sure, that's fine. I got the platinum in Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3 and Skyrim. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about because I played that shit on PlayStation. So, my argument there is like, you took it. Just say it. Be like, oh, anything with legacy will come out. Okay, so that means I'm getting Doom 3. That means I'm getting Wolfenstein 3. Elder Scrolls 6 is coming. Fallout 5 is coming. Starfield, keep it. But so they're full of shit. And that's why I don't understand in a lot of ways why this is being fought in the court of public opinion and why is it being fought there? And then why are they saying all this stuff? Because they're just going to do the reverse. It's like,
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Do you think it's to the benefit of Sony or Microsoft, either way or the other? Do you think it's to the benefit or the detriment that this is being discussed in the court of public opinion so much?
Oh, it's to the
think
detriment,
that
100%.
Okay.
100%. Because the thing is,
to the detriment of who specifically?
The public.
All parties? So,
No, seriously,
looking at the business side of it.
Because everything that's being said right now is not real, and both sides know it. Because neither one of them are actually in court.
Mm-hmm.
This benefits both companies because Sony can look at them and be like, well, you're buying exclusives. We don't do that. But because they're not under their oath, Jim can fucking lie. Right? He can lie. He can be like, we've never bought an exclusive in our life. Final Fantasy 16, what is that? That's not real. You know what I mean? Because it just makes his argument better. But
and there's always the technicalities of the argument, right? Sony can say we've never bought an exclusive by outright buying the developer. Instead, what they can say is, hey, we bought Insomniac after years of being the only people that publish their games and having a strong relationship with them. And guess what? Spider-Man would not have been made without us working with Insomniac and us fronting that cost. When we bought Insomniac, you didn't lose the potential for Spider-Man everywhere because it would have never happened without us and our relationships and our money and our relationship with not only Disney and Marvel, but our relationship with Insomniac. So they can say that, right? And they can say like, yeah, we bought Naughty Dog, but Naughty Dog was making original PlayStation games by that point. And they weren't making things that were previously on the market and would have continued to be on the market in short of someone buying them out. And regardless how you feel, it's a technicality, but it is true. So we can look and say, well, yeah, if Microsoft was saying we're buying 1 year of exclusivity for Call of Duty, and Sony can be like, yeah, or we're buying one game exclusivity for Call of Duty, and Sony can be like, oh yeah, we bought one game exclusivity for Final Fantasy VII Remake.
But even then, it's the thing is like,
the arguments are all fascinating to me. That's all I'm saying.
But they're all bullshit. Because
I agree, because
Sony's
every
full of
one
shit
of them is
Sony
perception.
does the stuff. And we saw this recently when Sony was like, well, Microsoft might raise prices while they raised prices. Like, they're lying. Just like Microsoft is like, oh, we could never make games as good as Sony's, but we would also never take games away. And it's like, well, you just bought Bethesda because you can't make good games. So you bought Bethesda so you have good games in your portfolio. That's fine. I don't care about any of this stuff. It's all fine. I'm a free market capitalist, baby. Everyone should get bought. Do what you want to do with your products.
I'll tell you right now, in looking at Sony and Microsoft in the sense of just how the things have personally benefited me, I'm telling you right now, Sony is missing out, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. I would fucking love to play any, and I'm not saying that there's not a good reason as to why they can't, but good on Microsoft, because I would kill to play any PS3 exclusive that I adore on PS5 in 4K at 60 frames per second without it having to be a remaster.
Dude,
it's fucking awesome. Yeah. I'm probably going to play Fable again because I can play it at 4K 60 frames per second. I'm probably going to try and play Red Dead 1 again because why the hell not?
I downloaded all the Gears games, like the old ones.
Yeah, but that's my point. It's like, dude, I was thinking about it. Fallout 3, does it have 4K 60 frames on Xbox? Fuck yes.
Yeah.
That is killer.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And I think Sony's missing out by not doing something similar. So there's that part of me that's like, right now, I like where the competition's at, and I don't particularly care what's going on. But I think both sides are making arguments that in a vacuum makes sense. But then when you look at them in the bigger scheme, it's like, yeah, but you're both just changing perception of things that you both do to try and make it look strategically beneficial for you or strategically hurtful against Sony, one way or the other.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's really. I just think that because there's so many eyes on it, which in the age of the internet, it's kind of hard for there to not be.
Yeah, I mean,
but
I don't know. For me, it's like I wonder why this wasn't just done in quietly. I don't know. For me, if I was Sony, I would have just been like, "Fine, you guys can do this. While you guys are fighting this in court, we're gonna just buy up a bunch of companies." But they're not doing that either.
Well,
so it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, think about it this way. If this works, Sony stands to benefit for the majority because even though there are eyes on this, it's still only the core gaming population, which is still a rather small amount. There's probably 1 million to 3 million people that are really looking at this and have any stakes in it or care, or it's going to really hurt their opinion of Sony or Microsoft either way. Then you have the 120 million other people who bought PS4s and are going to buy PS5s who are just worried about whether Call of Duty is on PlayStation. So Sony really stands to benefit far more than they're losing by making this loud and out in the gaming sphere for the few hardcore gamers to see, because they can make themselves look foolish, and so can Microsoft and everyone involved, but it ultimately doesn't hurt them. So Sony's aiming to win by barely hurting their PR image for a small group of people who are probably going to say shit about Sony, but then keep buying Sony anyway. And then for the casual gamers who didn't even know anything about what was happening, they win.
100%. I don't know. I still think the console war was lost when backwards compatibility became a thing. That's part of my big thing with all these arguments. I think they're all stupid because nobody's leaving their library. The only thing I feel like could happen, and I'm not saying people won't switch. People will switch. But the people who are spending money on PlayStation are not going to switch.
Yeah.
And even if they buy an Xbox as a second console because they'd rather pay $15 to play Call of Duty than $60, who cares? If they still have a PlayStation, who gives a shit? There's no way, with backwards compatibility being a thing, people are going to leave the libraries. It's just not happening. So I feel like all the arguments of people are going to leave the Sony ecosystem, full of shit. Until Microsoft goes, we will foot the bill. If you want to come over here from PlayStation, pay us $99 for every 100 games you have, and we will switch them to Xbox versions. That's the only way they need to be worried. Legitimately, that's the only way.
Yeah. Which is, as we all know, would never happen.
No.
You'd become a loss leader immediately.
Yeah. So at that point, it's like, who cares?
Yep. Well, moving on to the next thing of news, Gran Turismo appears to be attempting a pit stop on PC. Series lead Kazunori Yamauchi, I never know how to say his damn name, confirmed that Polyphony is considering a port and moving the series off the PlayStation consoles. It won't come without difficulty, though, as he continued on to say that, quote, Gran Turismo is a very finely tuned title, he added. There are not many platforms which could run the game in 4K 60p natively. So one way we make that possible is to narrow down the platform. It's not a very easy subject, but of course we are looking into it and considering it. I think Gran Turismo would do well on PC. So I'm not surprised to see this, but I have been curious as to how they're going to do, because Gran Turismo tends to be like a system showcase, but there's that part of you that's like, well, so is Spider-Man, and Spider-Man made it to PC fine. So not being a developer, this is a curiosity, but I also definitely the way he's saying it, why would he be lying? Sony games are going to PC. He's probably genuinely looking and thinking like, there's some challenges we'd have to overdo, and whether it's worth it or not is a numbers game,
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think you have much to add on to Gran Turismo.
I do not.
Yeah. Next thing up. Finally, something interesting came out of the fight for Call of Duty. Documents in the case have revealed that Sony and Microsoft don't intend to launch the next generation of consoles until at least 2028. In fact, this appears to be the soonest the companies are envisioning it happening, implying it could be even further down the line. This would make a lot of sense considering that this would be the longest console cycle we've gone through, narrowly beating out PS4 generation by a year. PS3 and Xbox 360 were abnormally long, and PS4 was quite a long time as well. But much like PS3 was elongated because of the financial crisis of 2008, the same thing is here because of COVID's impact on gaming and ability to meet demand. So they want to squeeze more out of this product, and then, of course, get more games out of it from developers who have been slower to release because of COVID crisis as well. This checks out. Now, something to note, this doesn't say there won't be mid-gen refreshes.
Yeah.
So, Chris, with that in mind, clearly it's not a question of whether you buy this. There's documents that say this. But what do you make of this? Do you think it kind of checks out? Do you think it's strictly from business of COVID impacting? Or do you think it was always intended to be this long? Because if you remember, there was a remark from, if I'm not mistaken, it was Jim Ryan, but it was someone, maybe Mark Cerny, saying that they didn't want generations to be as long. I think it was Mark Cerny during the showcase for PS5 where he was doing the tech side of things. But clearly COVID changed that, or at least it seems that way to me. Do you agree? And then what do you think about mid-gen consoles coming or not?
I agree. I feel like the mid-gen refreshes, I felt like this last time where we were basically looking at a PS5. They just didn't want to call it that because it wasn't a huge leap. And I don't know. To me, it's like depending on if these are depending on the power of the mid-gen refreshes, like what does that mean? Is that basically a PS6 and then what? We're just not calling it that because we're not doing a flashy launch and we're keeping the same form factor. You know what I mean? Like what are we looking at? Because if it's more powerful and it runs things better and blah 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 blah, at a certain point that's just the PS6. And that's what I wonder about these mid-cycle refreshes, is it feels like very convenient wording so that they can have their cake and eat it too. They can give a more powerful console, and they can have a hype cycle for the new console. Not against it. I just find it interesting that, in my opinion, we're kind of looking at a new console generation.
My devil's advocate thing there would be that the difference is that games are made to work across both of them without backlash of cross-generation issues. No one questions whether or not PS5 is holding back the PS5 Pro because it's the same namesake and the games are essentially built in the same way. Whereas if Sony were to actually say, well, here we are 4 years in and we've made a more powerful thing, so this is PS6, they would get a lot of flack for not having, we're seeing it right now, for not having strictly PS6 games. People be like, why are you holding back my PS6 with these PS5 games? So I get your point. I think in essence, I get what you're meaning, but I think it allows Sony a lot of wiggle room to not have to worry about.
Well, I agree. That's my thing.
Because I don't think you'd ever see a PS5 Pro exclusive. That's really my standpoint. But Nintendo has done clearly weird things because there were new Nintendo 3DS exclusives. I don't know if you remember that.
I do. But that leads to a part of my point is, wouldn't the base PS5 hold back the PS5 Pro?
I mean, technically, sure. But no one's going to say that because the expectation is different.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're on the same page.
Yeah, we are.
They have their cake and eat it too. They're releasing a PS6 and they're not going to call it that. It's going to be $600.
What year?
25.
I'm saying late 23, early 24. That's where my brain's kind of at.
That makes sense.
Because that'll put us 3 to 4 years into the console cycle. When did the PS4 Pro release? It was 2017. That was actually 5 years in, wasn't it? Hold on. PS4 Pro release. It might have been 2016. It was 2016. And so that was 3 years because PS4 came out in 2013. Interesting. Yeah, we'll see. And, I think one of the other things, while we're just talking about the idea of a generation, right? I think Sony specifically puts a little bit more emphasis on trying to have, and everything does this to a degree, but Sony tries to have some really new thing to bring with it. So like a new controller, like we're going to bring controllers and how you interact with the game forward with this console. And they don't really have to do that with the PS5 Pro. It can still just have the DualSense. They don't have to, they don't have to be like, well, we're also bringing 3D audio. Like that was the PS5's shtick. And the PS6 will probably have some new, like, this is the big change we want to make for this generation. I'm not saying Xbox doesn't do that, but I think Xbox has been more iterative to where most of what you're seeing with enhanced backwards compatibility, they started on Series X. So it's like all they did was iterate on that. So you can look and say, well, yeah, the Series the One X is where they started it, and then they continued it on the Series X. And you can say that the Series X, of course, does frame rate boosts and stuff, but we already saw the 4K resolution boost on Xbox One X, and they're just furthering the idea of enhancing backwards compatibility, which is great, and I'm glad to see it. But they're not as worried about Sony of having something that's specific to that console, which is good and bad. I think it makes your console seem less flashy because it doesn't have something new, but it still has something valuable. Like, I think the Series X enhanced backwards compatibility is incredibly valuable, and it makes replaying old games feel like they did when you played them without anyone having to remaster them at all. And that's impressive, because playing Oblivion the way I am right now feels like the dumbass, like whenever I was 12 or however old I was like, whoa. And I know Oblivion didn't truly look that good back then, but it's okay nonetheless. That's all right, though. Moving on to the next piece of news. CD Projekt Red has given more details on its remake of the original Witcher game. In an investor's report, the company describes the game as a, quote, modern reimagining, end quote, and is being turned into an open world game. We'll likely not see this game for years, as CD Projekt Red has basically confirmed the game is in very early development and is likely years away from release, but at least we have a little more information about it. So this is actually not surprising, but I'm surprised that they didn't say this with the initial announcement, because I remember asking, like, are they going to make the world open world, or are they going to keep it a linear game? And clearly they opted for an open world. But why say that 2 weeks later? If your game is super far away, you don't have to worry about trying to keep it in the news every now and then. Just say it and then shut the fuck up.
Well, clearly CD Projekt Red wants to be in the news. And there was that rumor via David Jaffe that Sony was looking at purchasing them. So maybe they're trying to keep themselves relevant. And every once in a while, they're like, hey, this is open world. You guys like those? You guys like open worlds?
Do you think Sony would look at buying them to basically at least have some frontier of combating the Western RPG wall of developers that Microsoft acquired?
100%.
Yeah,
100%. If I was Sony, I would be right now trying to buy BioWare at a discount and then bumping money into them.
Well, so that's what I was about to say. Is short of, so I guess at this point it's better to say like an independent, right? An independent studio that Microsoft hasn't already bought. Who besides CD Projekt Red is even a good? Like, who among them have put out RPGs that have become just as beloved and sold very well, brushing up close to like these Obsidian and Bethesda numbers to a degree? Like The Witcher 3 propelled them to that.
If I was Sony and if I had Jim Ryan's wallet,
and shit, so did Cyberpunk. Just to throw that out there, Cyberpunk sold incredibly well, regardless of the controversy.
If I had Jim Ryan's wallet, I'd be talking to Larian. I'd be talking to CD Projekt. I would have bought Spiders before Embracer. I would have bought
I think that's actually true. Greedfall would have been the game if I was Sony to make me go, give them the right time budget, and they can pull it off.
They can.
Because I'll tell you, before Greedfall, that was my question. I always liked their ideas and I disliked their execution. And then they finally pulled it off with Greedfall. And I'm like, you give them a little bit of time and a little bit of money, and I guarantee you that if you have a studio like ICE helping them, you can have a killer studio there, and it would have been cheap.
Yeah. And then I think Warhorse Studio. If I was them, I would have
Warhorse.
Kingdom Come.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's the thing. So, like, my initial response really was to say that those are great Western RPG developers. I don't think any of them quite, besides CD Projekt Red specifically, carry the weight of Bethesda or Obsidian.
They don't.
Larian, I think, gets close to Obsidian.
You
in
don't
terms of niche love. And you don't. You're right, because Sony has proven time and again that with culture, money, and time and creative freedom, with a little bit of, wrangling that in enough to be like, you still have to get a game out in a reasonable time, has worked very well for them.
Yeah. I think the thing is, even with the Call of Duty thing, right? Sony's sitting here like, we will never be able to beat Call of Duty. And probably not, but that's strictly because of name recognition. Same way that Fallout and Bethesda and Skyrim and all these games, they're really terrified of them taking them. But there are thousands of games better than Skyrim. Maybe not thousands, but there's lots of games better than Skyrim. But it's because Skyrim, right? So if spiders could have made Skyrim and it wouldn't have been as big because it's spiders, right? So what Sony needs to do is invest the money, invest the time, take the cachet that comes with being a Sony first party, and then be like, this is our new RPG. We've just created a nucleus of the greatest RPG studios in the world, and then just make games out of there. Have these core studios like Larian do their top-down Divinity, Baldur's Gate, that kind of thing. Have the Obsidian guys, and then
I think what's interesting there is that you're basically telling Sony to do what Microsoft did: buy these studios and still let them make smaller games. And I think that's the weird thing is Sony is very. They tend to want, like, they let smaller games come out. I don't want to say they don't, because Concrete Genie is a smaller game and it was great. And Puppeteer and all these weird games that were made within, in-house ways were great. And I think that they showed a lot of what Xbox is doing, but Xbox is doing it to a much higher extent. They're like, Obsidian wants to release fucking Grounded and Pentiment in the same year. They're both smaller titles that didn't cost much to make, and they have a niche enough following, and they're odd enough games that people will play them to try them out, and they'll probably at least break even, if not be reasons for people to subscribe to Game Pass. Bam. I think Sony's mindset, whether it's based in what would actually happen or not, is that we don't have Game Pass to bolster what we do, so we have to make sure people are buying this game. And so Housemarque is a good example of Sony coming in, buying a smaller developer and being like, here, we're going to give you this. But even then, Pentiment is probably like a $30 to $40 game, right? Returnal was $70.
Yeah.
So my point being is that I don't like.
It's $20.
Does a Larian game at $70?
Yes.
On PlayStation perform well enough for Sony to feel like it was a justified purchase? I don't know the answer to that. I think Returnal is probably a good example because they clearly seem impressed by Housemarque, so maybe it is.
Hold on. I mean, Divinity 2 is sold over 1 million copies. It's not huge, but it's probably on par.
That's pretty good.
Probably on par.
And that was a $60 release at least at launch. Yeah.
I doubt I'll be able to find the number on this, but
on which one?
Baldur's Gate.
Did it release?
It's in early access.
Oh yeah, fair.
Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know if they
count sales.
Baldur's Gate 3 in early access has already sold over 1 million copies.
Interesting. How much did Returnal sell? I think Sony announced that. Also, Returnal needs to hit PC. 560,000 copies as of July 18th, 2021. So that's, who knows what it is now.
I can't find it. Returnal did not crack the top 10 of NPD the month it came out.
So apparently Sony considers Returnal a mega hit. And that was July 25th, 2021. Huh. So it was within expectations. So maybe you're right. Maybe that is a real path forward for
as
Sony.
of July 18th, 2021, the game has sold over 560,000 copies.
Yeah. But that's crazy. It must go to show how much money and marketing they put behind certain things. Because if I remember right, I think that Sly Cooper Thieves in Time sold like 230,000. And they were like, that was a flop. And I'm not saying that isn't a flop. But I would imagine that Returnal probably cost at least similar to make as Sly Cooper. Maybe not. But with games expanding in cost in comparison to their PS3 counterparts, there's a real curiosity there. So, yeah, that's interesting. It sold 150,000 copies in the US over 6 weeks. So maybe it was considerably less. VG charts is not necessarily the best indicator to go off of. But let's see what they say. They showed the game at 0.58 million total, so around 580,000.
Yeah.
If VG charts is to be believed.
So if you just think about it that way, think about a Larian game promoted by Sony as a Sony tentpole first party one. I'm sure it would be a Horizon game, but fine. Like, so, because I'm kidding. I hope to God it's not that.
I only say that because I feel like Sony is running the risk of overpopulating their IPs, like overstimulating you with them. But not everyone seems to have a problem with that. So that's just a personal gripe. I don't want New Horizon 4 times a year. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but it's like it's odd. I don't know. It's weird to think about. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
I don't know. I just think they need to build a nucleus of incredible developers who make incredible games. And I know that sounds super simple, but I think right now it's very easy.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, but I don't even know that it is easier said than done, right?
All of them have to be receptive to being bought out. All of them have to be bought out without the CMA for some reason. I'm not saying it would, but without any regulation board saying that it would be an issue, which I don't think that the highest probability in all of that would be CD Projekt Red, just because they're the biggest one.
Right.
So doubtful of that, but there's a lot of variables as to why it may be easier said than done.
None of these studios, they could probably buy I would be willing to bet that Square Enix, Larian, CD Projekt Red, buying Spiders and Warhorse from Embracer would cost less than $69 billion.
So let me ask you something more important that I think is a more important side of this. Do you think Sony cares about the perception of, or really the perception and the reality of what they say? Like, is it PR talk when they say they have a culture and they work with developers slowly to bring them in and make sure their culture matches and then buy them? Do you think that matters for them scooping up and buying like Larian and people that they don't really have a strong relationship with? Do you think that the hypocrisy of looking like doing a Microsoft move, do you think Sony cares about that? Because like Sony buying CD Projekt Red when they don't really have any super special relationship with them. If anything, they have a bad relationship because they essentially admonished CD Projekt Red for releasing Cyberpunk and then telling them that they could get refunds without clearing it through Sony or whatever the drama was. But my point being is, does Sony care about the perception of that, either from people thinking it looks hypocritical, or would Sony also literally be like, it's not the way we buy studios? What do you think? Do you think that would impact their choices to do these things? Or do you think Sony would at this point be like, this is the game. If we're going to keep up and survive, we have to play it to some degree. We're still buy studios when we can, the way we always did. But other times we got to buy to not miss out.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes we got to buy to not miss out, right? Like maybe Sony doesn't want Sonic, but if Microsoft is looking at buying Sega, you better figure out a way to get in there and do it yourself, because you can't lose Persona. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You can't, you don't want to lose Baldur's Gate. And while it may not do much for you, it may not make, Jim's penis hard to have Divinity exclusive. but it would make a lot of people's penis hard. You know what I mean? It would sell a lot of consoles.
Well, and then at what point is it also reasonable for you to be like, hey, Larry, and make a cool RPG that people love of your niche style, and it'll be a PS Plus premium day and date launch.
I mean, that's
like
been my argument. That's been my argument forever. Like, I think I said on the show, buy Konami's IPs and then buy a bunch of small studio. Buy someone like Team Cherry. I don't remember who did Dead Cells, but buy the Dead Cells guys and be like, you want to make a Castlevania roguelite? You know what I mean?
It's Team something.
I think it's Half Moon or something like that.
No.
Half Door.
It's 2 stars back to back, cut in half back to back. Dead Cells developer. I can't believe I can't think of what it is. Motion Twin.
That's it. Motion Twin. Musin Twin. Because to me, I think
it's just a star. Never mind.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of Infamous. 2 stars.
I always said, I said, and I mean it. They should have a PlayStation showcase where they come up there and they're like, everyone hasn't been happy with premium. This is what we got cooking for you. And then it's a slide of just Motion Twin, Team Cherry, all these things, and then it has the Konami logo. And it's like they're gonna make small IPs specifically for PS Plus Premium, exclusively for Sony, and we've acquired all these studios. Like, this is what we're doing. Microsoft did that. You know, take a play out of their book and be like, this is what we want to do. We're going to make a bunch of indie games that are, I guess they wouldn't be indie games. We're going to make a bunch of small games to supplement the PS Plus catalog. And then, hey, we have these big purchases over here. Larian Studios doing an RPG. Spiders is doing a big budget, have a quote come out on Twitter. Hey, we got bought by Sony and our budget is 10 times more than it was on Greedfall. The budget for Greedfall is 10 times bigger. We got voice acting in Greedfall 2 because we were bought by Sony. You know what I mean? Like, you want that kind of stuff. Just buy studios and improve them, because clearly Microsoft is doing that. Well, I guess I shouldn't say clearly, but...
Do you think that Sony sees more value in letting that space be filled by indies that they have a strong relationship with, and then still making their 30% without having to spend a dime in development? I'm kind of thinking, like, what would Sony's reason to be? What would be the reason against it? Would it cannibalize indie sales on their own platform or not? I don't really, thinking to it, Sony has a lot of goodwill with indies, and they sell a lot of games through indies on their platform, partially because they're one of the bigger platforms, but they also tend to highlight indie games during sales and during launch period of certain types. And would that get in the way or not? Like, is it a clear fire good? Because I've said the same thing. I love the idea of them getting some smaller studios, even if it's just creating smaller studios within their own umbrella, and being like, hey, we're going to give you the ability to just choose from games from PlayStation's IP history and do interesting, odd games with them, and just see what you make. And let's say, hey, these are day one PS Plus premium games to help. We can't do that with our big games, but we can at least do it with these games. And what if Stray was internal instead of being an external game?
Right. Kena.
Actually, I would be surprised if Sony doesn't look at Ember Labs as a purchase.
I would be shocked. I think it's interesting because I think we'll see a lot more M&A before this is all over. And I just think that Sony needs to take advantage of what Microsoft is doing and go. And quite frankly, if this Activision deal goes through, Sony better start buying stuff. They better be like, okay, gates are open. Square Enix, let's go. I don't necessarily think that's the best way, but maybe that's something they need to do. Maybe you do need to invest in smaller studios with a couple $1 million to just make stuff for PS Plus Ultimate.
Well, I've long said that I think if your competition has a good plan or a good idea, take it and make it your own. I don't begrudge anybody. Like, if PlayStation's like, dude, Xbox is killing it with enhanced backwards compatibility, we got to up our game and start doing enhanced backward compatibility and figure it out. That's awesome. If they do, not that they have to, and it may not make business sense to, but if they do, I'm not gonna be like, look at Sony copying Microsoft. I'm gonna be like, cool, they saw an obviously good idea and thought we can do that and provide that value to our customers as well. So if the answer is to go, people are really enjoying these small games coming out of these, smaller studios, or the other thing of Sony allowing bigger studios to have small teams making games. That's important. Like, who's to say that Sony couldn't let a little section of Sony Santa Monica go off with Eric Williams and go, you wanted Castlevania? We can't justify a $70 AAA multi-million, $100 million Castlevania, but what we can do is let you work with the IP and do what you want to with it for $10 million. Here you are. Because I think there's a lot of value in saying, like, Obsidian gets to make their big game. They get to make Avowed, and they get to make The Outer Worlds Part 2, and they get to make all those things. But then they also get to put out Pentiment, and they also get to put out Grounded. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wish Sony would find a way to do that. Let your studios have more teams inside of them and have a couple of small teams of like 20 developers. Like, here, what can you make 20 developers for $10 million?
Yes. I would be interested to see Sony.
And then you get namesake, right? You get to go, this is a Santa Monica project.
Right.
Not this is some new developer that we just made project. You know?
I wonder, tell me what you think of this idea now that we're thinking about it, right? Sony establishes a studio of just development guys. And then their people in other parts of the company start just feeding ideas into there.
Basically do what Todd Howard does right now, where they're just all they are like executive producers.
Yeah. Like Cory Barlog is hard at work on God of War, but he goes to the studio and he's like, I have this idea, see what you can do.
Yeah.
Or,
that's actually what Todd Howard did. Apparently that interview, you should watch it. He was talking about how the Indiana Jones game ended up coming about. And he said he originally pitched this idea like in 2009. And the reason it didn't happen is because at that point, Lucas Games wanted to publish it, but Bethesda were like, we're a publisher, we want to publish it. Right. So the deal fell apart. But he said that whenever he saw that Disney was doing more stuff with other developers, since Disney owns all that stuff now, that he reached back out with some of his contacts, but that he couldn't make the team happen for it. And that the Elder Scrolls team probably wasn't the right, or the Bethesda Softworks team is probably not the best fit for it, and their hands are too full. So he's like, we took it to Machine Games. They're a good fit for it. They have the right type of mentality. They don't have anything going on right now, and he's still creative directoring or whatever, but they're being the developers. So that you're kind of right. He can. That's exactly what Square Enix does with Tetsuya Nomura. They'll just be like, hey, he's the director. And he'll be like, I'm what? But no, he's like executive producer and creative director and all sorts of stuff on a plenty of games. Kind of like Kojima used to do at Konami. They would just be like, Kojima's somehow in relation to this game. So,
yeah. I don't know. I just wish we could see them start doing more creative things. I think we need to start.
I could see that.
Maybe getting our release times down from 5 years.
I personally agree with that. There's a lot of different feelings and a lot of different stuff going on with Sean.
Layden.
Why am I Sean Layden? Yeah, and some people, rightfully so, are asking, are criticizing his quick jump into Chinese funded development, all sorts of stuff. But one thing I think is very poignant that he said, and it's clearly coming to a head, at least for me personally, and my own interest in games, is that games can't keep being 40 hours, $300 million games forever. Not every game can't strive to be that, and that it's okay for AAA games to be like, here's a 15-hour $100 million game.
Yeah. And that's the best.
I think, my tendencies for games tend to float toward that, or at least right now, they go through cycles, but I do kind of get exhausted of every game being so long and asking you to stick with it for so long and being demanding of your time. because I think it creates some unhealthy tendencies, which I have my own unhealthy tendencies, playing Hot Wheels to the point where I'm starting to hate it just because I'm trying to minimize the amount of time to get the platinum, when I could have just done what they intended and kept playing the game for fun to get the platinum. But no, I have to be an idiot and say, I've got to get this platinum, so let me play the game in probably the worst way and hate myself for it, you know?
I do.
Some of it's on me. I don't absolve all blame. Let's get through the rest of these news real quick, and then you can quickly get through your idea. We can present to the community your brainchild.
My brainchild.
Does that sound like a plan?
Me and TT Doc's brainchild.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I will give him his flowers for helping me with the rules here.
Okay,
anyway,
there we go.
Let's see what's next on the news.
All right. God of War Ragnarok becomes PlayStation's fastest selling first party launch in the company's history, selling through 5.1 million copies in its debut week, dethroning the previous title holder, which was The Last of Us Part 2. In addition to this, God of War got some publicity as it landed Time Magazine's Game of the Year. So it got some visibility outside of the gaming sphere. So that's pretty big, you know? Just to counteract that, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet sold 10 million in 3 days. I think that's important to throw out there. Because I think both games are partially selling on the back of their IP and just general excitement for them, but it goes to show you how popular Pokemon is and how relative, and also it is still a show of how impressive Ragnarok is, because it still did pretty well in comparison to Pokemon, which is a global, humongous, multi-franchise and multimedia IP. So next thing up, PS5 users get access to PlayStation Tournaments that launched today, a new system feature. That is a new take on a similar initiative that you may remember from the PS4 era. So this allows users to sign up for and compete in certain games via activity cards in the quick menu while you are playing games that are compatible with this feature. More are being added, but there are a handful of games day one. I personally, it's cool. I'm always for adding more UI features and stuff that people might use. I see zero use for this. Doesn't mean I won't find one day, but I personally have no care for this. Chris?
I don't care.
I figured not. And then last, but certainly not least, as I think this might be one that a lot of people agree with, or at least hope for, Criterion Games said in an interview with Eurogamer that it would love to return to the Burnout series in the future, stating that they think it'd be, quote, really fun, end quote. And a lot of people have been begging for Burnout to come back.
Including
doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Podcast host.
But they'd love it. What? You know, Chris, it's been so long since Burnout. Last game from Burnout being Paradise. For you, is more Burnout that you'd be happy with in the context of modern games and everything? Would it just be more of Paradise? Would it be more of the games before that, like Burnout 3 Revenge or whatever it was called? Or do you think that if Burnout comes back, it does need to evolve to some degree? What are your thoughts on a new Burnout? What would it have to do to be successful to you?
I mean, honestly, I would take Paradise with a little bit of Burnout 3 brought back in.
Okay. What aspects of Burnout 3 do you feel like Paradise didn't have?
It had it, but I feel like it wasn't as deep with just the crashing mechanics. Like,
yeah,
I like the way Burnout 3 does it, and it's in Burnout Paradise, but it's less pronounced.
Like takedowns and stuff? Or do you mean like, yeah, okay. That's what I thought. One of the game modes of Burnout, and all of them that I really love, is the one where you wreck and then see how long you can extend the wreck to just cause more damage and more money, and you just see how you can rack up damage. Do you ever do that?
Not that I know of.
I think there's a platinum. I think there's a trophy, unless I'm really conflating a different Burnout.
In Paradise?
I know that's in a Burnout game, but I think Paradise has that, and I think there's a trophy related to getting a certain amount of money built up in that game mode.
Maybe.
I don't know if you have
I must
platinum.
not have done it because I don't remember the game mode.
Yeah. Well, the idea is that like you wreck on purpose, and you try and wreck in such a way that after you wreck, you can use the analog stick to continue turning the car and like jumping from car to car, and you got to just keep causing accidents to happen so it'll keep your momentum up, because once your car comes to a rest, it's over, and however much damage you racked up is like your score. It's like a however much money and damage you racked up. It's a very fun game mode.
That would be cool.
Yeah. I don't know personally for me. I think I'd be happy with more of Burnout, but with a higher emphasis on takedowns being pulled back into the game. I don't think you played it, but Need for Speed Payback actually had something very similar to that in it, because Payback had the idea for cars that were classed. So you had cars that were for racing, cars that were for drifting, and cars that were for, I think it was called like, it wasn't chauffeuring, it was something like that. But it was a car that was made for you to transport people to and from place in one piece. And in those missions, your car had armor and it had a ram damage. And so cars would come up on you and you had to like knock the health out of the other cars. And I loved it because I was like, this feels like Burnout, but in Need for Speed, which I was cool with.
Yeah. Are you still planning on getting Unbound?
Absolutely. I will 100% get Unbound. I don't know that I'll get it at launch day. I think I'm going to start with Callisto, which I'm still waiting to see whether or not you get disc or digital with yours. I'm just so I know whether or not I have to buy it. If I don't have to buy a Callisto, I'll probably go ahead and buy Unbound day one. If I have to buy Callisto and Unbound, I'll just wait to buy Unbound for when I'm ready to play it. Yeah. But I want to do Callisto first because I've just come off of Hot Wheels, so I can give racing a break for a little bit.
Fair.
Yeah. Okay. What are your thoughts on games being early? Because I don't know if you saw, but Unbound tweeted, you asked and we listened or whatever. And it was like, you can get the game early access if you pre-ordered this high-end version or if you're an EA Play Pro member.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, one of the Skinny Rage, one of our longtime friends, he was like, who asked? And I was like, the shareholders. That was my version of the joke. But what are your thoughts on getting games early just for paying more for a pre-order?
That seems like the best reason to pay more.
I think that's crazy? Fair. It's way better than. Well, okay, let me say this. Well, I don't think most games that you pre-order you pay more for, but if you pre-order this $99 edition, you get early access by.
That's the best. Like Hogwarts Legacy, I'm going to buy that one.
Yeah.
You know, and that's strictly for the thing. I don't care that the Harry Potter surrogate gets a red cloak. I don't give a shit about that. I want to play that game 3 days early.
That's fair. I would definitely say that if you made your pre-order bonus that I get to play early, as opposed to my pre-order bonus or my collector's edition bonus being that I get some set of armor that I don't end up using, then I'd be fine. One last interesting question for you. What is your thought on armor that's really cool that they only give you at the very end of a game? So like a good example is in God of War, there's a set of armor that one of the characters gets at the very end of the game. And I'm like, I wish I had that armor for that person the entire game because it looks sick. But here I am getting it when I'm never going to play the game again. That's clearly not true or unlikely to be true. But point being, it's like you're giving it to me when I'm wrapping out of the game. I've done everything the game has to offer. And most people are going to do this as the final challenge. So why give me cool armor and be like, yeah, you're still going to keep playing when there's nothing to do? I hate that.
It's for New Game Plus, but New Game Plus doesn't come in the box anymore. So it's like, well, what's the point of all this?
Yeah, that's true. I guarantee Ragnarok will get New Game Plus, though.
Oh, 100%.
It's like that. It's like the first 3 months update. We've added New Game Plus. They did it in Horizon Forbidden West as well.
Yeah.
I think they did it in God of War 2018.
They did do it in God of War 2018.
Oh. Well,
Evil West comes in the box.
There you go. Just like it should. Then again, it's a very arcadey game. I'm not surprised. That kind of game needs New Game Plus, like Resident Evil 8 does. It's like, you don't have to play it, but if you want to keep playing these games and speedrun them or go through them with a power fantasy of all the weapons that you get later, let's do it. But
I like
alas, it is time for you to offer up your take and your proposal for the trophy challenge of 2023, maybe in the future known as the Great Trophy Challenge of 2023.
No, I've just been debating this in my mind. I really liked doing the one with me and you and Blake. I thought that was a lot of fun. I think it would be fun to do it with the audience. So me and TT Dog, well, mostly TT Dog actually came with rules. I had some ideas for things I wanted to do. Like, I'd love to do a monthly, like, this is the PS Plus game. The first person who gets it gets bonus points, something along those lines. You know,
now this would be a competition with us included, right?
100%.
That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
And to me, you know, I was thinking maybe we do it for money. That would be fun. Everyone can put in $25. You know, there's tons of ways to raise the stakes and do fun stuff. But I think it's just a cool way to, you know, engage with people. Can engage with us. We can engage with them, and we can all compete and we can talk shit when Brett just randomly shows up with 40 extra platinums at the end of it all.
I turn my trophy list private the entire competition.
No, but that's the thing. Like, I really like when me, you, and Blake will just be like, check this plat I just got. I love that. Like, I think that's so fun. And I think it would just be cool to have a thing in the Discord of Josh Ayers just did Kingdom Hearts 1, you know? So that's what I want to do. I hope people are interested. If people want to do it for money, Brett, do you have any qualms about gambling on our trophies?
No, I think all I want is to do what everyone is comfortable doing. So if we want to just do this for straight bragging rights, I'm totally fine. I mean, we can put something into the mix, but you know, if everyone wants there to be a pot that you pay into, we can absolutely do that. I think that's fun. But for people who may not want to put their money on the line in that way, if enough of you guys feel like you want to be part of it, but you don't like that aspect, we don't have to do that. We can find some other prize. It can be something simple. It could be like a triangle squared shirt. We can find some way. Triangle squared #1 trophy hunter.
You know what we're gonna do? I have a plan, right? We can do the money thing if people want to do that. I think that's fun. We could also do a WWE championship belt kind of thing. If you
win,
have the belt, you have the belt for a year. The next year you lose, you sign the back of it, and you give it away, and you send it to the next person.
So you're telling me we have to get a physical belt? Oh man,
I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. It's fine.
Hey, I might have people in my life with 3D printers so we can make this happen.
Perfect.
Because it'd be cool to make the center of it be like a platinum trophy.
Yeah. Or what if it's not a belt? It's literally just a big bust of a platinum trophy, and you got to keep it.
That would also be cool. But
you can sign the inside of it.
See, but it'd be an honor system that people would have to pass it on when they lose the. You know, that's the only downside to it. Is like you have to trust that people would hold up their end of the bargain if they ever lose it, you know?
Yeah.
It'd be like a thing where like, hey, if maybe they decide to stop gaming or stop listening to the podcast. All right, then you got to send it back in so that we can keep the spirit alive. Like we'll pay for it to come back or whatever it takes, but we got to, you know, this is the prize. I like the idea of it being a belt or a platinum trophy, but it being a belt's kind of funny. Like I have I'd love to be on camera with the belt in hand.
Absolutely.
Like, you think you can get this? Come get it from me. Because right now I would arguably the belt holder.
Yeah, I mean, technically, you would be the first winner. It was a trial run, but to clarify anything people might be worried about, I think, you know, Mark was suggesting that we do it through True Trophies because they have their own rating system. I have my own way of thinking of doing it, but I think the cool thing that he was proposing was you could conceivably win with only like 5 platinums. It's if they're just that difficult and rare, right? And I think that's cool. You know, obviously the bonus games is a whole thing. Like that could be, maybe that turns the tide for people. But
well, let's say this right now. This is not set in stone. This is able to be worked with. We have a beginning guideline that we're apparently Chris worked out with Mark. Or Mark apparently largely worked out, and because of Chris's prodding of him, one of the two.
Well, but Mark had a lot of feedback on the Metacritic thing, so I was like, I'm not even going to take the feedback. I'm just going to go straight to the source. Mark, hand me the rules. What do you think is best?
Yeah. So with that in mind, this is not something that we're saying for sure is happening. What we want to make sure is that we're doing something that people are going to actually want to interact with, that can continuously have new people coming into it. There's nothing to say that you can't. You'll just be potentially at a disadvantage.
Well, you wouldn't be at a disadvantage, right? Because it starts January 1st. That's how I would want to do it. I think if we're going to do it, we'd start January 1st. And then, okay, you want to join later, you want to buy in or whatever it is, fine. You can do that. All your trophies from January 1st count.
Okay.
But that's I think the one thing
that's what I'm saying is you'll be at a disadvantage if you haven't been spending from January to whenever.
Time, right. Yeah. But I do want to say the one thing that I think is very important, because we talked about, well, not we, but you and why is it it's blanking. What last week's episode, you guys discussed, thank you. Yep, I'm so sorry. I lost it. I was thinking Jim for some reason. You guys were talking
Jim
about
right on the mind.
That'd be sick. The spam games, and the way that we're working on a way to make sure that you can't buy Stroke the Cat Simulator 50 times and win. That's not no. So,
but what you can do is get The Witcher 3's platinum in every region of the game released.
You absolutely could do that
and win if you just really are crazy.
I don't think that would be worth it, but you could. Because, and that's the thing, like right now, Evil West is an ultra rare platinum. So right now, my score when I have the Evil West platinum will be up here, but it's an easy platinum. So eventually, it's going to come down and settle in here. So
that's what's going to be really interesting is the final dates point of where your platinum falls.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and that's something I just think it'll be really fun. I really liked doing it. We got the nice 30 platinums that year. So
here's something that, because I know I've logged on to True Trophies once. Are we strictly looking at the score that comes from the platinum itself, or is it your total trophy score? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, would it be the person who has the largest growth in your overall trophy score? Or would it be based only off of the score that's coming from the platinums? And that might be a question for me to ask Mark, because I know he's far more familiar with True Trophies than either of us.
We'd have to see, because I think my original plan was 1 point for a bronze, 2 for a silver, 3 for a gold, 5 for a platinum, and then that platinum number would be multiplied by the percentage of people who haven't earned that platinum.
It would be weighted. Yeah, right. It'd be weighted. Yeah.
That way, Jumping Taco, you'd get a 1% add-on bonus, but something that's a 1.3 rarity, it's like, oh shit, that was worth a lot. You know what I mean?
So I'm thinking in reading this that it is totally inclusive of all trophies, but the platinum count, or the number of platinums, is weighted to kick you over in case your score ties. Mm-hmm. So like he was mentioning, if for some reason you have a score tie, you get the platinum count to be the deal breaker. So like if you both have the same score, but one of you got 12 platinums and the other person only got 6 platinums, then you'll still win by nature of having essentially platinums high.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it'll be interesting, because I think, there's a lot of cool stuff we could do. Maybe someone earns bonus points for the week or the month, because we have a vote on who got the best platinum, even if it's not the rarest. I definitely want to do, like, this is the game of the month is Callisto Protocol. Get the platinum in Callisto Protocol, you get an extra 1,000 points. You know what I mean? Something along those lines. So as long as people are interested, maybe that's the community's sake, Brett. I don't know.
We can better work it out. Yeah, well, I mean, because I know not everyone who listens to us is a trophy hunter. We're aware of that, and we know that there's a smaller section of the gaming populace that is into trophy hunting. But I think as long as we have a good chunk of people who are wanting to interact with us on this and make it worth the time and effort that we would be putting into it, I love the idea, but I don't want to waste our time doing something that is not going to be received
Right.
To any degree. So help us help you and let us know if this is something you're interested in. And I guess the community's sake would be, are you interested in it? And do you have thoughts on whether it should be a buy-in with money, with a pot that someone wins? Do you want it to just be an item or something special that you can get? Because I mean it when I say I don't mind paying somebody to make a shirt that says Triangle Squared #1 trophy hunter or something like that. Just to, or if you like the idea of a belt, a physical item that we can pull money toward to start a tradition, you let us know what you like about it and if you want to be part of it, and we'll work from there. But Chris, I think unless you have something else you want to say in relation to this or anything else,
no,
I think
good.
we're at the end of this thing, right?
We are.
Okay. Well, Chris, thank you for joining me, as you almost always do. You're still sickly this week, but I guess it's not as bad as last week.
It happened today, so I didn't have an excuse. I wasn't going to call out.
I'm glad. I hope it's at least a different sickness. But all right, man. Just a reminder to everyone, if you want to be part of the community's take, or if you want to just chit chat with us about what we talked about throughout the episode, follow us on Twitter over at Triangle SQRD. You can find us, like I said, on Facebook in a group called Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. Find us in the Discord, always linked in the description below, be it on YouTube in video format or whatever podcast service you are using. If you are using a podcast service that has a rating system, consider giving us a rating and a review. Really helps people know whether or not the show is worth our time or not, or worth their time or not, and it helps us know what you do and don't like about the show. Lastly, for all you wonderful people like our newest patron, which I think I have up, and apparently I thing that out, but if I remember, is Alex. Let me pull that back up. But yes, we have a new patron this week, Alex. And if you want to join them and become one of our patrons for as little as $1 per month, then head over to patreon.com/Nartech. Hopefully you won't regret it. We like to think that the show is value. So if you feel the same way and you feel so inclined, we appreciate everyone who does so. So without further ado, we want to give a huge shout out to Alex, Barry Rogers, Stingray X, It's a Sin to Win, a.k.a. Sean, Aztec King, Lecheon69, The Lord Corgi, Salvador Garcia, Hammond Egger, Bailey Robertson, Cypher Primus, Kyle Grimm, Rude Days 93, Kevin Bacon Bits, Christopher, Danny Villalobos, Jehudi MD, No Fate, Josh Ayers, Derek Porter, Donovan Williams, Constantly Kenny, Matthew Green, Sean Santarude, Steven Salazar, and Shadowist. Thanks to each and every one of you. We hope you have a good one.